Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of the People Progressing podcast. And today I have Amy Reczek with us, who's a sales consultant, nonverbal body cue expert. Just really interested in getting into this today. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, Amy, thanks for coming on. What I usually do is ask my guests to just kind of tell us where you're from, where you grew up, what you like to do as a kid, where you went to college, and those kind of things. So we get a little bit background of who Amy is and what you are.
Sure. Well, Joe, thank you for having me. I actually grew up in Montana. Um, as a kid, I was pretty active in sports and theater and music. But as I went along, I played softball for quite a while. But third grade, I really started my music career, if you could say that, and theater, and really loved the aspect of all of that, getting to really dive into the theater side, and then singing was really my thing. So through high school and through college, I went to college just for the music experience. My degree is in psychology, but I really wanted the experience of the music background that they had there. And I went to college at Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota. And just the collaboration and the friendships and all the things that happen behind the scenes with a choir and within theater is very similar to being on a sports field
Yeah.
with those teams. And so it was a ton of work behind the scenes, but really it was a collaborative effort, which was amazing. And I still talk to a handful of those people today. So that's a little bit of my background.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you are right. Choirs, bands, it's all being part of a team.
Hmm.
And it kind of led you into a career. I find it fascinating. You majored in psychology. Did you do much with that major coming out of
Um,
Concordia, or did it go right into sales?
well, I would say that I fell into sales, but my psychology career served me quite well in sales. I actually did not know what I wanted to do with it. I took one psychology class my junior year of high school and knew immediately that's what I was going to major in. I absolutely just loved the art of connecting and how humans work around each other. But I had no idea what I was going to do with it. My mom was severely scared that I would never get an actual job to pay to pay my rent or mortgage, I think. Because she kept asking, "Are you going to go on to get a master's or doctorate? Are you going to counsel?" I'm like, "I have no interest in counseling. I just like the theory behind it and all of the study behind it." So, from a young age too, she would always say I was very quiet when I was growing up. I am certainly not that way now, but I was very quiet and I would observe a room, which I still do today. And she would always say, you wouldn't speak to really anybody when we'd go places. And then as soon as we got back in the car or back home, you would ask 8 million questions about what these people were doing and why were they, but very specific things like why were they standing that way or why were they wearing that? Or so I was really always heightened in doing that anyway. So I think that as soon as I got my hands on one class, thinking, oh, there's more to this, it really got me excited to have a degree in that. And then I really didn't know where I was going to land. I came back to Montana just very briefly and then ended up in Colorado, and I've been in Colorado for 20 some years now. But really had no idea what my path was. I tried some things out. I did things to make ends meet, like we all do when we're young. So I served, and I was a teller at a bank, and I did, multiple jobs at one time. And um, I had at the time a friend of mine say, you should check out this company. I've heard good things about them. And so I applied for something called inside sales. I did not know what that was at the time. I just knew I needed a job, an actual steady job with insurance. And they hired me. And within about 2 months, I knew that was my thing. I was like, oh, this is just connecting the dots for people. This is really just serving them on the path of their success. And if I can do that, then I have success and it's a win-win. And so that really started my path in sales. And within about 10 months or so, I went to outside sales, which I did for quite some time in my sales journey.
I I'm writing it down. You said something that, and we'll get to it here in a minute. Serving people in
Mm.
sales. I think that's very intriguing. I want to go back first though. You said you had jobs like bank teller and some other odd jobs here and there. Did you feel yourself studying people even then?
Oh
Like,
yeah. Hmm.
what do you
Yeah.
think that comes from?
I don't know. I think my dad had some of it just naturally. I think so. I think I inherited some of that, but it's always just been really fascinating to me to figure out how the room works. You know,
Mhm.
if you walk into a room, a boardroom, and figure out who works, because a lot of times the person that signs that contract is not the person that's actually making the decisions. They have people for them to help them with that. They have too much on their plate. So really designing kind of the room and the awareness around it is a really curious factor for me. And so for me, throughout my entire career and even before with the jobs that I had, I was always just really curious about where these people came from, what they did, how I could help them, even if it was having coffee in the morning or, cashing a check or things like that. There's always a story to
Yeah.
everybody. And so if I can focus on that part, it really makes my job a lot more fun. And again, then the success comes for everybody.
Wow, that's beautiful. It's funny because I'm the same way.
Mm,
Exactly. I love watching people and studying them and I believe the same thing. Everyone is unique.
mhm.
Everyone has their own story, and everyone has their own obstacles, opportunities, and so forth that we're all dealing with every day. Um, some people call it emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
You're very high with emotional intelligence. Is that something that's really helped your career? You think
I think
blossom?
it is. I think it is the key success to my career, and I will say even more so, it's the key success to what I'm doing today with coaching and consulting, and speaking within businesses into their sales teams. Um, I didn't really know what it was. EI was not a buzzword back when. I'm
Yeah,
not going to age
yeah,
myself too
yeah,
much. I've been in
yeah.
this for 20 some years, but um, there was a pivotal moment in that where I had a manager for a brief time who was phenomenal, and we were driving across between Oklahoma City and Tulsa to see clients, so we had some time to chat. And so we were chatting, getting to know each other, and it was the first time ever. And that was about 16 years into my career at that point, where anyone ever, especially someone with a title, asked, "So do you feel like you have EI?" And it caught me so off guard that even in because it's a business structured sense, I honestly didn't know how to respond to it because I didn't know if that was quote unquote acceptable in
Right,
business.
right.
And so it was just a phenomenal conversation, and it took so much out of it that of course I'm now talking to you about it. So it was impactful. But really we had this wonderful conversation around, well, I think so. I don't know. Do you think so? Because at the time, again, it really wasn't
Yeah,
as buzzy as it is now. But it's so impactful to have that. And I do think that it is something that is completely can be learned. We have many, many things that we can do on a day to day. Staying curious is one of them that really puts us at the forefront of really getting that intelligence to help us with our career. But it was phenomenal that someone within the business setting had asked me that. It really did take me back for a minute to try to figure out how to answer that. And I was so grateful that someone noticed it
yeah,
at the time. I was like, wow, I've always done this. No one has ever said this is what I do. And it was a solidifying moment in my career of, yes, I have this ability to do this, and I practice it daily to really have that success for everyone involved.
that's fascinating. I love this because the reason I do this podcast is for exactly what you said. Curious
Mhm.
people intrigue the heck out of me. Um, their stories, how they do things, why they do things, what makes them do things, what makes some people take a risk and other people back off of a risk. Different things like that. But I want to ask you this because you said this, and it's do you think the number one way to help yourself with emotional intelligence is to be just to tell yourself, be curious about this person?
Yes. And every time I talk to a group and we're talking about things like going into a meeting or setting your agenda, one of the things I always say is write down how to stay curious. That's
Wow.
part of your agenda, is to
Wow.
stay curious. It doesn't matter if you've worked with somebody for 20 years.
Right.
As you said earlier, we all have stuff. We all have, I call them seasons. We all have seasons that we go through. There's always things that we can learn more about somebody in their environment, not just business, but personally. So what can you stay curious to learn about? And if you just stay in that mindset, it opens it up to the conversations naturally. And it's a really great way to build the trust in the business and all the things that come with that.
Plus, it's fun.
Oh, it's so much more fun. And it's so much easier. It's so much
Yeah.
easier. We always put this weight on ourselves, especially as salespeople, of getting a deal or getting things across the line or getting things to the next step. And I get that, right? I've lived that, and I know that you have quota and all of those things, but there's ways to take some of that off by bringing in that human element and really staying curious, because then it takes it off of you and brings it on them. And the more they talk, the more you're going to learn, which means the path is easier. So, yeah.
Okay. So now you got me going again. So you
Hmm.
said the more they talk, the more you learn.
Hmm.
And I believe one of the top aspects of a great leader is listening.
Hmm.
So I have a saying that the more you listen, you learn to listen, so you can listen to learn.
Yes.
So how important is that
Hmm.
for a business leader, a coach, a mom, a dad, or whatever it might be, to just be present and listen to people
Hmm.
to understand where they're coming from and what's going on?
Yeah. It's vital. And I think that we don't know it enough. We don't practice it enough. And quite frankly, nobody teaches us really. I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's rare that we're
Right.
taught how to quote unquote listen. 95% of the population walks around feeling unheard. And if we think about that in another setting, really we listen to respond and not to hear.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
lot of times when we're talking to people, or if we're even in some sort of emotional or heated discussion, we are not hearing them at all. We're waiting for them to stop talking so we can respond. And if we can really sit back in okay, I'm really focusing and being present, like you had mentioned, on hearing this out and then waiting to respond, it's amazing what comes out of that. And in business, we are trained, especially on the sales side, we are solution trained. So when we're talking to someone, we ask a question, our mind is already on the
Mm-hmm.
response. So we're not actually hearing the question. And then our response is a solution driven response. So rolling that all the way back to stay in the present more of really listening to them and hearing them. And some of the tactics around that and ways to do that is to mirror them. You can mirror them in words if you want to. So what I hear you saying is, and you repeat it back. You can also kind of question that I always tell people is your silver bullet question is tell me more. Tell me more about that. Tell me more. And you can funnel questions. So you ask three questions on that same topic so you don't move to solutioning. So you're staying with them and you're
Yeah.
letting them explore it, and that's staying curious, and you're hearing and you're learning and all the things. So really there are tactical ways to do that, to train to do that. But again, a lot of us aren't. I was not trained to do that until I opened my own company.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I did practice it before, but now I'm like, oh yeah, there's an actual method to this. Let's put it into practice.
Oh, I love it. It's I wrote this down. You said listen to respond. We more of us listen to respond instead of listen to learn. And
Hmm.
I want to touch on that a little bit, not just with sales, but in leadership as well, because most leaders are coaches, or I don't call them bosses anymore. I call them leaders or coaches. We're always trying to solve.
Hmm.
We're always trying to help you. We're always trying to coach you. So when you're saying something to me, what I'm doing is right away I'm trying to figure out how to fix it in my
Mm-hmm.
mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I get anxious to fix it, and I don't listen to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think it's a huge challenge for leaders. And the way you put that is great. We don't listen. We need to listen to respond. I mean, I'm sorry. We don't need to listen to respond. We need to listen to just learn, to keep
Mm-hmm.
learning.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of comes down to this. You got me thinking here. This is awesome, Amy. Thank you. Uh, what it really comes down to is just trust yourself as the leader or the person who's making the sale, whatever, that you'll be able to get to what you want to get to.
Mm-hmm.
But you said two things before was always be curious, and then you also use the term serve.
Mm-hmm.
So how can I be curious about you so that I can serve you?
Yes.
And you mirror them, tell me more about that, some different techniques to get you more into a listening, curious mode.
Mm-hmm. And I have in my coaching sessions, when I'm working with people, one of the things that tactics I do to stay in present in that and let them figure out where they need to go, because it's not my solutioning that's going to help them, it's their own solutioning that will help them,
There you
is
go.
to ask how they feel about it. So if we're talking about something and they come up with something, my next question is, how do you feel about that? If we're going over a call or an email structure that they're talking around, how do you feel about that? Well, I don't know. It's okay. I like this part, but I don't love this. Okay, tell me more. What do you love about it? And then let's heighten that. And what are the things that are a little bit missing? Let's figure out how we can reframe to make it fit you best. And then it's their authentic self, and it's not me throwing stuff at them that
Right,
isn't
right.
authentic to them.
And
Yeah.
then now they own it.
Now they own it. Yep.
Now they
And they
own
can
it.
run with it, and they feel really good about it. Yep.
Yeah, it's like I used to tell, I still do when I'm coaching baseball. I always tell, somebody a player will ask me, well, how did that look? My first response to that is, how did it feel?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it
Yep.
felt a little bit like this. Well, did it feel right or did it feel good to you? Well, not really. I said, well, then you felt it wrong, right? You felt it when
Mm-hmm.
you didn't do it. I said, that's the first
Mm-hmm.
step in doing it right is when you feel it
Yep.
wrong. And so I get them to own that feeling. And then once they own that feeling, now we can work on getting it right. And I always tell them, once you feel yourself do it wrong, we're good.
Mm-hmm.
We're good because now you can coach yourself a little
Yep.
bit. So what's the
Yeah.
number one thing when you're coaching a client on this emotional intelligence piece, when you're talking to them about your first interaction with somebody, what's the number one thing you tell them?
Well, I mean, I tell them number one is to stay curious. Number two is always be authentic to you. So if you're trying things out and it's uncomfortable, that's okay. We want to be in that uncomfortable space because we're growing. However, if it's really that gut reaction of, boy, this is so not me, throw it out. There's so many things that, especially in business, that we are, kind of commercialized to think about things in the way that they should go, that we try them, I think, in a lot of senses without them being true to us. And the more authentic that they can be, the more that's going to shine through and people are going to want to do business with you. Those are the first two key ingredients to work on. And then there's a slew of things to work on that are tactical around that, but really staying curious and being authentic to who you are. Not everyone is going to love you. That's okay. 50% of potential clients are not a good fit. 50%, so half. And if we can come to that conclusion quicker around, okay, this isn't really who I need to do business with, and that's completely okay because somebody else is going to be a better fit for both of us, then move off of it instead of staying in that too long and wasting time where you could be focusing on that time with people that are really excited to work with you.
Yeah.
So really kind of, bringing that pattern into light of just being a little bit more present and curious and authentic with who you are.
I'm going to ask you this question, and I hope this is a good question for you. How hard is it for us people in those situations where we're trying to persuade somebody to stay authentic?
I think I will give salespeople a lot of credit. I think that, you know, if we go way back in the day, sales is very much that pushy used car salesman type of vibe. And actually, when they pulled that, Daniel Pink did a study on that. That's actually the number one word that came out of that still is that salespeople are pushy, and that was the visual that came with it too. Was this, you know, used car salesperson? So that it's still out there, but you know, 99.9% of the people I know that I work with that are in sales are genuinely wanting to help the client that they're serving, and really have a passion for what they do. You do not go into a long-term career in sales if you do not like what you do. It's not an easy career, it's not an easy path, and it's difficult to climb. So you really do have to have a passion for it. So I think the authentic self part comes fairly easy. Where the glitch happens is when we get in our own head and try to then do more product based instead of conversational based. And that's where it gets tripped up. So the authentic self is pretty in line. It's just keeping it centered so we're not flipping over to just, you know, checkbox questions and how do we push a product. So
Right.
that's where I would say is where the glitch gets.
And
Yeah.
what caught me there was this, you know, authentic self is the service part of it.
Hmm.
When I or anybody is trying to persuade or sell somebody on something, first you have to believe in what you're persuading or selling
Hmm.
is going to authentically help that person. And if you can put yourself into that mode of the service mode, in terms of, I know that if you buy this, your life is going to be better.
Hmm.
So I'm going to stay my authentic self and not push too much because I'm just going to stay in my mode of trying to serve you, not
Hmm.
sell you, but serve you. Would
Hmm.
you agree with that?
I would. I would. I think the best sellers out there are ones that are 100% service based, and they've figured out how to do that within their own authentic self. Um, you know, everyone has a product and everyone's product is similar. So it's a commodity. So really trying to find, I know there's big push out there right now in businesses of what's our value add and how are we customer centric. Those are some buzzwords, you know, that always circle around. And really what it comes down to is how you're showing up for them every single day. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Because most businesses fill the pits, if you will, so fill some of the gaps, but then they stop there. And really what we're wanting to do is have them be able to have an amazing experience with the journey of working with us. So how do we then not just fill those things that may be missing in their current provider, but then how do we up level that to have them have a really great experience every time they talk to us? That's what it's
Wow.
about.
Yeah.
And that's when you have client over client that doesn't leave you in signs year after year, because they feel like that experience is worth the money. You know, 86% of clients say experience is just as important as product or service. So making sure that we're aligned in that experience is more important than your product or service. That's what
Okay.
needs to lead. Hmm.
Wow. Question. This question is, how does a salesperson who has to meet
Hmm.
data numbers,
Yeah.
quotas, and all that, how do you manage that? Staying within your authentic self, establishing the rapport, establishing, hey, I'm here to serve you and help you with this. And all of a sudden, by the end of the month, I'm 3 sales short, let's say,
Hmm.
and I got to get there. How do I manage those two things? I call it data and people. How do you manage the data part of it versus the people part of it when the data part is what they're judging you on?
Yeah. That's difficult, and it's difficult in a more transactional setting. So if you need to close things monthly versus a longer sales cycle, that's a lot more difficult. If you have that longer sales cycle that's happening, then that's a relationship build that you are doing. So you can put that human first, and then you're on track to close those. And it does take a while to ramp, no matter which side you're on. But it's difficult if you have those monthly quotas that you're needing to hit, or if you're, you know, 2 sales short and it's more of that transactional. That's tough. I don't know. I think you find a line and a balance in everything. But you can do, with all of your touch points and things that you're doing in your outreach, you can still make that authentic. You can still make that about them. I call that you framing. I work with a lot of people on that. So instead of, sending an email or a voicemail to somebody and talking around you and how amazing you are and your products and services and how you're going to solve all of their problems, flip it and talk about them. They always want to hear about themselves. They don't want to hear about you. So really making sure that you are still in that curious mode will help get to that close faster.
And
It's not easy. I would say that none of that is easy. It's a practice day in and day out. But to your point a while ago, it makes it a lot more fun. You're in kind of a zone when you do that, and it makes the experience all the way around better.
okay, so now I'm going to ask you this question. How do you coach the sales manager who is in charge of making sure that my salespeople
Mhm.
make their quotas? Because I'm sure you're not coaching them just to tell them that everyone's got to meet their quota or else you're not
Mhm.
doing your job. How
Mhm.
do you coach a sales manager to coach their team in that scenario?
So I think the biggest thing, excuse me, is the tiny, tiny keys that open the biggest doors. So it's the tiny changes that we make, the tiny tweaks that we make on a day to day to really help with that movement. So and it's definitely per person or per team, if you will, depending, but really some of the gaps are things that they may be missing. So if we're missing some things of really how to close out a meeting or next steps, or if we are really not well versed in how to catch someone versus on email, because I mean, how many emails do people get every single day? So how are
Yeah.
we standing out and creating impact? Let's look at those things that we can tweak that are always very minor. We're not doing anything that's completely changing the way of the world here. They're just really minor steps that really do have huge impact at the end. So really coaching them through looking for those. What are those things that we can find that we can just make a little bit more peak to those to have a little bit more impact, to create a little bit more energy throughout the cycle, and then that will help with the long term. So it's not necessarily anything huge. It never has been. It never will be. It's always those tiny things that we do on a day to day that will help us climb.
It's awesome. This is great. You got me really fired up here today. I'm going to ask you this question. I want to get into the body language. You're a body language expert. First and foremost, how did that come about? And
Yeah.
how do you become a body language expert?
You take a lot of courses.
Okay.
I, when I was exiting corporate sales, I was kind of trying to figure out what my next move was. And I knew I pulled a lot of the stuff when I was in sales from my psychology degree, just naturally. And I had all the training experience in sales and hard skills, quote unquote, if you want to call it that. And then I always was curious about analyzing people. And what you analyze with people is not really what they say, it's how they're acting around what they say. And so I was curious about nonverbal. And when I was opening my company, I wanted to incorporate that, but I didn't quite know how. And I wanted to make sure that it was impactful. So businesses could respond to it in a way that could up level them. And so it wasn't something that was a little soft, if you will, coming to the table. So I found a company, The Science of People, out in Portland, Oregon, that's amazing. They study human interaction and people in body language. That's all they do. And I took about a 10-month course, and I re-up that certification every single year. I went into that thinking, as a salesperson always does, that I knew everything. And I, about a month in, was like, I know nothing. It was a very challenging course, and it was so eye-opening of everything that we do and just those micro movements that we do and things that we kind of interact on a day-to-day basis with people, and we're not aware of it. I always equate it to things like when we're grocery store and we always have people, you might be one of them, listeners, that do this, but we're always in our own head of what do we need to get in the grocery store? What time frame do we have? Maybe the kiddos are still at home, we got to get back home, whatever that is. We all have our stuff. So when we're looking for stuff, we stop in the middle of the aisle. it's a non-awareness of our surroundings and our body language. Same thing happens in an airport a lot of times, where
Yeah.
people are looking around and trying to read the signs of where they're going, and they stop in
Yeah.
the worst places to
Yeah. Yeah.
stop, right? But it's we're not aware. And so we go through life a lot of times not aware of what we're actually putting out there in our nonverbal communication. And it's up to 93% of how we communicate. So it's massive. And if we're talking about that in personal relationships, it has a huge impact, obviously, but in business relationships as well has a huge impact. So I put all of that together with the nonverbal and the psychology and the sales aspect of it to really design what I do today. So it's a little bit different if people are thinking, oh, sales coaching. It is not your typical sales coaching has been around forever. This is definitely your relationship building, more around communication and consulting than it is sales pushing.
And you said the nonverbal is, what'd you say, 93 to 94% of communication is nonverbal?
Yeah, so you have 7% of communication is speaking, only 7%. And then you have about 35% that are things like your ornaments, so how you show up, what you dress like, and your tonality. So it's not what you're saying, but it's how you're saying it. If you can tell that by someone who speaks really soft or is very angry and they're very loud, that's tonality. And then about 55% of it is your facial expressions, your body language, all of that. So if you take your body language, facial expressions, it's the 55%, roll it up into that 35%. You're looking pretty high into how we communicate that's not verbal. Yeah.
Difference between men and women on nonverbal.
Um, yes and no. I think there are, I would say posture is the biggest one. And that's definitely a learned behavior. Men are learned to take up more space naturally, and women are learned to minimize their space naturally.
Hmm.
We need to change that. Women need to take up more space. But that's definitely a big one.
What makes you so interested in all of this? All of
Um,
it.
all of it's put together. I think I have a passion for, well, it comes back down to serving. I have a passion for serving. I grew up serving. My dad always had me doing something for nonprofits. For a while there, I did think I was going to go into nonprofit world. Um, and I still do a lot of that with being on boards and those types of things. That is at a core for me, with my authentic self. So I think it's driven to its core from that. In a business setting and career setting, sales fell in line with that because it's just service. I was in sales long before I had the title. Anybody who is serving at a restaurant is in sales. Anybody who is connecting with someone at a bank or a teller, whatever that is, we're all in sales. Everyone is in sales. We're in sales all the time with our partners and our friends of what we're doing this weekend. So really, it was the bigger picture of serving, and then finding my niche of really loving business to business communication, and how those businesses succeed together. One cannot function without the other. So then how can we serve you for us to all have mutual success? Just really is exciting to me.
That is a great way to put that. Before I forget, because we're already 40 minutes into this, how do people get a hold of you? So
Yeah.
I own a business. I want Amy Reczek to come coach our team and do all that. How do we get a hold of you, and what's the best way to do that?
Mhm. They can certainly find me on LinkedIn at any time, or go right to my website at salesandpresence.com.
Okay,
Easy. Hmm.
and we'll go over that again. But
Okay.
I want to know a little bit more. You just intrigued me again, because everything you do is in the service of others.
Hmm.
Um, it's when you broke from the corporate world and you went out on your own. What was it inside you that was okay for you to take that risk? Because corporate world, I get a paycheck, I have benefits, I
Hmm.
do all those things, and now I'm out here and it's all about service, but there had to be something inside you that said, I can do this. What was that?
Um, so a few things. So a sales career, if you're decent at it, is pretty lucrative. And so I was walking away from a very cushy financial job at the time. I had full benefits, all the things. But I was getting very bored. I was doing the same thing. I wasn't learning anymore. So the decision was, do I stay in this, uh, till I retire, and then find something else on the side, whether that be a job or just an interest that would pique some learning or something I could be curious about, or do I stick with this because I really do have a passion for this and figure out how to develop it in a different way? Um, and what helped me with just jumping, I've always been one that jumps and figures it out on the way down, is that I have lived my life that way since I was born. I was born with a heart condition, so I've had 3 open heart surgeries so
Wow.
far. I will have more. I am stable and per se healthy, if you will. However, I am acutely aware of time, and
Yeah.
I always have been, way more than others. And I think we always have these peaks in this. I see this with people when we lose a family member or someone very close to us. You can see what happens with them for the first handful of months after that loss. Um, Things change, and people see. I call it the clarity effect. People see really, really clearly in those time frames of what they love, what they don't love, what they really want, what they don't want. It's stripping away the mundane and stripping away that day to day, and you just get really clear on that. And then as things go by, time goes by, you get back into your patterns and your old habits, and you usually go back to your old ways, and then things stay the same. I have never done that. I've always been in that clarity mode, and I think part of that is because I have doctor's appointments regularly. So it's not very long between time frames where I can get into those patterns and not be pattern interrupted to where I'm jolted back to a reality that's like, okay, technically, when I was born, they were the percentage of me getting to my 18th birthday was very low still.
Wow. Wow.
So there was not really any longevity for me, and now there is. And so I kind of take it as I'm technically not really supposed to be here, so what do I have to lose in creating something magical and creating impact and getting excited every day in what I do, um and getting out of that mundane as much as I can.
Ah,
So
that's what an awesome way to put that. And what a great perspective. That's my final question is going to be one of my final questions is going to be your perspective on life. But
mm,
what a great way to put that. You know, I look at it. My dad had a friend, and when he was 84, I took my dad over to see him, and this guy was a commercial airline pilot,
mm,
and he was laying in a bed. He couldn't get out of bed. He was 84 years old and wasn't doing too well. And he looked over at my dad and he said, I just wish I could fly again.
mm,
And I got to thinking, man, when I'm 84, am I going to say, do I just wish I could coach again?
mm-hmm,
And I honestly say, yes, I can say that. And it's kind of that kind of opened my eyes. Um, Fortunately, my health has been pretty good, knock on wood. Um, but that clarity, the way you put that clarity on life is beautiful. And the way you look at life is beautiful. The hard part for most of us is when we get into that clarity part is staying in there because it's
mm,
real easy to just go back to the
yep,
normal, mundane, everyday, safe place, right?
yes. Well, and we all have things, right? We have kiddos and
Right.
we have mouths to feed and we have mortgages and we have, all those things. It's not easy at all. And there was, the first 2 years that I was in, I'm in year 5 of my business now, but when in my first 2 years, I constantly was asking, what am I doing? What am I doing? what am I doing? Is this idiotic? Is this going to land? What am I doing? But I kept telling myself, you know what though, Aim, at any point in time, you can go back to corporate sales.
Yeah.
Any point in time. There is not like it's totally okay. Just sit in it a little bit longer, create a little bit more, see what comes out of it. And I think too, part of it is that I am on a continuum. Every once in a while, every couple of months, the question will just randomly come up in my head. If today's the day that is my last day, would I be happy with my life? Would I be really happy with what I got to do? And that is a focus point for me. And every time it's a yes. So at some point, if it's a no, I need to change it. So that's also a driving factor for me of really, am I happy with where I am? Am I happy with things that have happened? And I will say, we all have those seasons. I've had a lot of loss in my life. When I was building this company, my mom was very ill, and I was taking care of her at the same time, and she passed during the creation of this. But again, that was a clarity focus for me of like, what do I have to lose right now? I got the experience to help her and to take care of her. A lot of times we don't have that luxury. I'm very honored to have been able to do that. But boy, that was tough. So we all have the things and the things that could completely keep us where we are and keep us stuck. I think for me, it's always a challenge of how can I push myself even more. There's lots of things that come with a heart condition, things like PTSD and anxiety and all of those things that, a lot of people are dealing with mental stuff. And I certainly am not alone in that, but it's a challenge every day sometimes. I saw a post from a dear friend of mine a while back that said, sometimes anxiety and depression looks like not taking a shower. And it's interesting because that's one of my pivotal things. And I commented on her post and I said, you know what? I literally just said to my husband the other day, it was a challenge for me to take a shower today. I need to focus on my mindset. So it's always a hyper awareness around what's going on. And it's super easy with everything that's going on in the world today and all of the social media and things that we can look at to tap out of our center. It's super easy to get out of it. So I try really hard to bounce back into it as much as I
Yeah.
can. So,
Amazing. You're
yeah.
amazing. How much joy? This is the last question before my last three.
Yeah.
How much joy do you get out of coaching?
Oh, 150%. I am in my element. I absolutely love what I do. I get to serve people with different types of nuggets and things that they can take away to help them along their journey and their success. And I get to do that in the aspect of coaching and speaking, and it aligns with who I am and my history of theater and being on stage. So
Yeah.
it completely fits, and it's just an honor to be around those people and to support them in their
That's,
success.
this has been awesome. We've already been on almost 50 minutes, and I got three questions to ask.
Okay, I'll go quick.
Yeah, I wrote a book. It's called The Three Ps: Finding Your Purpose, Perspective, and Passion. So I always ask every one of my guests those three questions. What is your purpose in life? You've said a lot of it already, but if you could generalize it, what would be your purpose in life?
To leave impact.
And what would be your, go ahead,
Nope,
please.
that's good.
Are you sure?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I didn't use the two holes on the side of my head instead of the one in the front.
Well, I also said it would be short, so we'll meet in the middle.
Okay. What's your passion in life?
Mm. My passion in life is to experience as much as I can, to learn as much as I can.
And I say this, that your purpose and passion usually kind of equal each other. They help each other, they support each other. But what holds it together is your perspective. And what's your perspective in life that holds your purpose and passion together?
Well, that one's easy. That no day's promised.
Yeah.
So do it now. Mm-hmm.
Amy, this has been great. I know we just connected on LinkedIn, and when I looked at your background, I'm like, I got to get her on, and it exceeded my expectations. I was really excited about this today, but Some of the things you just have such great insight on things, and it's really powerful. And I appreciate you for how many people you're helping and coaching and supporting and all that. But I just appreciate you as a person. You're making the world a better place, and I thank you for that, and I thank you for coming on and making my listeners' day better. You've inspired them, you've taught them, you've helped them grow, and that's what this is all about. And I just am truly grateful for you coming on.
Oh, well, Joe, I'm grateful for you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for listening to this week's edition of the People Progressing podcast. You can get a hold of me through Coach Joe White 97@gmail.com. I'd love to come speak to you and your groups and so forth. But so would Amy. And, maybe someday a dream of mine would come true that Amy and I could go speak together and,
Yes.
tag team it. It would be kind of fun. But Amy, again, thank you. And everybody out there, please, please, please keep progressing. Thank you.